Hi, welcome back to Focal Point, AFR Talk. Glad to have you join the program. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. And I want to talk, and this would be a topic that we could take calls on the subject of happiness. What makes you happy? And I've got kind of a subset question to that. I'm looking at a piece by Arthur Brooks on the New York Times from this morning. The title of the piece, well, actually from yesterday, the title of the piece is A Formula for Happiness. And he argues that there is a formula for happiness, and I'm going to try to trace through a little bit of this, but this is interesting to me. There is apparently a general social survey that's done by the University of Chicago, and it's been done since 1972. By the way, question came up is whether the shooter in Colorado was for gun laws or against them. He was for gun laws. He was against the Second Amendment. He wanted restrictions on guns. That's one of his objections to the Republican Party, is that the Republican Party was for the Second Amendment. They wanted less restrictions on guns. He wanted more. That's why he was against the Republican Party. So he again, it's just a classic illustration of if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. And he knew, now he went there to target apparently his drama teacher, a drama coach, a debate coach rather, but he knew that this was a gun-free zone, and that he could gun down as many students, didn't have to worry about teachers, didn't have to worry about administrators. The only way he could be stopped is if there was a school resource officer with a gun, and it turns out that there was. So the whole thing from beginning to end was about 90 seconds long. And, tragically, one student was shot and is in critical condition today. And fortunately, only one was shot, because it could have been much worse, as armed to the teeth as he was. But he was against any kind of restrictions. I mean, he was for restrictions on guns, for restrictions on gun ownership, but not for him. He was happy to be able to have guns. He just didn't want you to have a gun so you could defend yourself against him. 888-589-8840. And here's this piece by Arthur Brooks, who's done a lot of great work generally on the subject. But let me just read a little bit out of this. And they're arguing that this formula for happiness argues that it's kind of split up between genes. Half of our happiness, according to this article, is hardwired in our genes. Big events. About half of happiness, he says, is genetically determined, but up to an additional 40% comes from the things that have occurred in our recent past, but that won't last very long. That just leaves about 12%. The good news is that we can bring that 12% under our control. It turns out this is the 12% of happiness that we can control. 40% is things that have happened to us recently, whether they felt good or felt bad. Sometimes things happen to us. They happen in our world. We can't control them, and they just feel bad. Decisions that other people make that affect us, or things that happen to us or happen to other people. And a lot of that has to do with our current state of mind. Now, I think this is too high. They're saying 50% of it is hardwired in our genes. But he says this, and I want to mention this before I get to this stuff, and then can ask you to call in on what makes you happy. What's your formula for happiness? So there's this general social survey, University of Chicago, been done since 1972. And according to Arthur Brooks, who is a genuine scholar, this is considered the scholarly gold standard for understanding social phenomena. The numbers on happiness from the survey are surprisingly consistent. Every year for 4 decades, roughly a third of Americans have said they're very happy. About half report being pretty happy. Only about 10 to 15% typically say they are not too happy. So about 10 to 15% of Americans are not too happy. The rest are either pretty happy or very happy. Now, he says this, beneath these averages are some demographic differences. And here's where, I'd like to know what your formula for happiness is, but also like to know what your explanation for this factor would be, because these, he says, are pretty consistent. For many years, researchers have found that women were happier than men although recent studies contend the gap has narrowed or may even have been reversed. Political junkies, now here's where it gets interesting. Political junkies might be interested to learn that conservative women are particularly blissful. About 40% of conservative women say they are very happy. That makes them slightly happier than conservative men, and catch this, significantly happier than liberal women. So the happiest batch of the bunch, the happiest people they can find, are conservative women. 40% of them say they're very happy, and that's just barely ahead of conservative men. There's something about conservative values, conservative outlook, a conservative view of life that tends toward happiness. I'm curious what you think that might be. But listen to this. Conservative women are significantly happier than liberal women. Liberal women, compared to conservative women, are miserable. They are unhappy. Their lives are joyless. And I'm curious what you think the difference is. Why are conservative women so much happier than liberal women? And here's the unhappiest people on the face of the planet, according to the University of Chicago, are liberal men. Only 20% of liberal men consider themselves happy. So the most miserable, according to the University of Chicago, this is not me, this is not Moody Bible Institute, this is not AFA saying this. According to the University of Chicago General Social Survey, the most miserable people on the planet are liberal men. And almost as unhappy as liberal men are liberal women. Meanwhile, the happiest people on the planet, again, University of Chicago, are conservative women, and conservative men are right there neck and neck with them. So I'm just kind of curious. Why do you think that is? Why are conservative men and women so much happier than liberal women and liberal men? And why are liberal men in particular the unhappiest, sorriest bunch of unhappy people on the face of the globe? 888-589-8840. Let's grab a phone call. Let's go to Mike in Hernando, Mississippi. Mike, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Thanks.
Yeah.
I've got 2 points. I'll make a comment on what you're just talking about, and then I'll give you a negative.
Okay.
Personally, I'm a conservative. I'm happy as all get outs because I have eternal life. I mean, I don't care the day to day. I trust God's will. Even on bad days, to me, I figure, well, it's God's will. The Lord's in control. But I think that, like you said, liberals can be more unhappy. I think it's because they're aimless and pointless. And they look for solutions in the society and the government. There is no solution in that area. It has to be the Lord himself, has to be a solution to living life at all. But I've got a negative for you, and I think you'll enjoy this. I went into my local Walmart last night to buy a Christmas card, picked up a card because it has a cartoon drawing of Jesus holding an iPad, and you open it up, it says Jesus on Facebook, and he is saying, Jesus on the card is saying, oh, wonderful, wow, got 12 followers so far. And I put the card down and I thought, that's nuts. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have dared see a card like that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's degrading to our Lord, to make him into a cartoon like he's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I thought I'd share that with you. I thought you'd like that.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for reporting on that. And yeah, it's just kind of sad to see, the way that day and the one whose birthday we celebrate has been denigrated, particularly because it's not where the American people are at. I'm looking at Rasmussen reports here indicating that 75% of American adults believe that Christmas should be celebrated in public schools. So these judges and these administrators that try to throw Christmas out of public schools, they are governing against the will and the preferences of the American people. 75% of Americans want Christmas to be celebrated in our public schools, and only 15% say no. So again, this is the tyranny of the noisy, petulant, angry, unhappy, miserably unhappy liberal minority imposing their values on the rest of us. And 66% of the American people, when they go shopping, they prefer to hear Merry Christmas as opposed to Happy Holidays. Only 21% of the people want to be greeted with Happy Holidays. 66% want Merry Christmas. All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Greg in Jackson, Tennessee. Greg, thank you for calling. Thanks for listening. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Happiness is so controlled by our circumstances and by different situations we face in life. And in America, I think we're so unhappy because of advertising. Advertising is geared to make you dissatisfied. You know, there's such a lack of gratitude in America, and without a grateful heart, you're not going to be happy.
You know, and it's interesting. I had a good friend, Steve Farrars, good friend of mine, great teacher, and he said, you know, he's talking about this. You know, and frankly, it's one of the reasons why I don't, I never look at advertising. You know, you get the Sunday paper, Greg. I never look through the circulars. You know why? Because I look through those circulars, and inevitably what happens is I will find something that 10 minutes ago I did not even know it existed. And all of a sudden I have absolutely got to have me one. And if there's something where you got to have it and you don't, and you can't afford it or you can't justify it, then what does it do? It just creates this little bit, you know, little bit of unrest in you. And I just don't need that. I just don't need that in my life. Anyway, Greg, go ahead and finish your thought. Well, I forgot to say what
Brian, is go to any third world country you want to and see kids playing with rocks and sticks, and they're as happy as can be.
Yeah. Well, you know,
if you come back to America, you've got kids that if they don't have an iPhone or an iPad or the latest computer games or Xbox, they're miserable because they're dissatisfied.
Yeah.
But as a Christian, Brian, I've learned that happiness could mean nothing more to me than breathing. I mean, I'm not looking for happiness. And Christmas carols, joy to the world. Jesus Christ did not come to bring us happiness. He came to bring us joy. And joy is something that we can only receive from God.
Yeah.
And the reason liberal people or people that don't have faith are so miserable is they don't know love, joy, peace, goodness, meekness, temperance, everything that the fruits of the Spirit can bring to your life will make you satisfied. When you believe in a sovereign God, there's nothing that can touch you.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. I couldn't agree with you more. And we'll take more calls on that subject, the subject of happiness. What's your formula for happiness? And why do you think liberals are the most miserable people on the planet? When I come back, I'll close the loop on what Arthur Brooks says that the key essentials to happiness, according to the University of Chicago, and you'll listen to him and say, you know, that makes perfectly good sense. That's the way I view things. So why are liberals so miserable when conservatives comparatively are so happy? 888-589-8840.